Okay, Chair, we are now live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this virtual Planning Control Committee meeting that's being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. Welcome also to our public speakers, and there's also an opportunity for the public and press to listen and view proceedings via our YouTube channel. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members, officers and registered speakers are in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being streamed live onto YouTube and recorded via Zoom. When your name is called, I'll undertake the roll call, so please indicate your attendance to confirm the required members, officers and registered speakers are present and can hear and be heard. And members, Councillor Ruth Brown.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel Allen.
Present.
Councillor Val Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Morgan Derbyshire.
Present.
Councillor Mike Hewson.
Present.
Councillor Tony Hunter.
Present.
Councillor David Levitt.
Present.
Councillor Ian Moody has given his apologies and Councillor George Davies is substituting for him this evening.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Nguala.
Present.
Councillor Sean Prendergast.
Present.
Councillor Mike Rice.
Present.
And Councillor Tom Tyson.
I'm here.
Thank you. And member advocates here we have Councillor Carol Stanya.
Present.
Councillor Helen Oliver.
Present.
And Councillor Jim McNally.
Present.
Thank you. Officers, Simon Ellis.
Present.
Nuranetta Kativu.
Present.
Melissa Tyler.
Present.
Sam Dakota.
Present.
Oh, could everyone make sure they're on mute, please? There's a bit of noise coming through. We have William Edwards on IT this evening, and from Hertfordshire County Council, Anaya Jakaka.
Present.
Thank you. Mark Youngman. No, I don't think he's here. Roger Taylor.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Daniel Tancock.
Yeah, here.
Thank you. Dave Hill. Oh,
He's trying at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. And Matthew Armstrong. No. And registered speakers, we have Miss Melanie Hill.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Claire Swarbrick.
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Sian Gulliver.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Kevin Hinton.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Hinton. Mr. Nathan Hanks.
Present.
Ms. Claire Newbury.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Simon Young.
Present.
Mr. Doug Neath. I have seen Mr. Neath. I think he might be on mute. Oh, yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Neath. And Mr. Tom Donovan. Mr. Tom Donovan. I've seen you somewhere. Oh. No, I'll move on. I'm sorry, I missed someone. Mr. Jonathan Billingsley. Mr. Billingsley, thank you very much. Thank you. And Mr. Donovan, can you hear? Can you hear me, Mr. Donovan? No, we'll try and get to Mr. Donovan's audio back later. Extracts from the remote. Sorry, did I miss anyone in the roll call? There's quite a few people. No. Extracts from the remote and partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda, and the full version is available on the Council's website, which includes information regarding live streaming, noise interference, rules of debate, voting and Part 2 items. Members are requested to ensure that they are familiar with the protocol. With regard to voting, this will be done using the raised hand button, and I will ask members to use the raised hand button when voting for, against and abstain, tally the votes and announce the result. If a recorded vote is asked for, I'll read the members' names in turn. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, in that case, I'll hand over to the Chair, Councillor Ruth Brown. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Anna. So we move on to item 2, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillor Ian Moody, and Councillor George Davies is substituting for him. Item 3, minutes of the 18th of March 2021. I'd like to propose that we take them as read and approve of them as a true record. The minutes of the meeting of the Planning Control Committee held on the 18th of March 2021. Can I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Are there any comments about the minutes? Can we agree the minutes then? Can we vote on the minutes, please, Anna?
Yes, could members please raise their hands, virtual hands, if they approve the minutes? Yes, that's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So I authorise the committee member and scrutiny officer to apply my electronic signature and initials to the approved minutes. Item 4, notification of any other business. There is none. Item 5, Chair's announcements. Audio recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. To clarify matters for the registered speakers, members of the public have 5 minutes for each group of speakers, i.e. 5 minutes for objectors and 5 minutes for supporters. This 5-minute time limit also applies to member advocates. However, tonight for item 8, I have granted an extra 5 minutes. So the objectors, the member advocates and the supporters each have an extra 5 minutes. And I believe we have 2 speakers for each. A warning will be given at 4.5 minutes to alert you that you have 30 seconds left. And at 5 minutes, I will ask you to stop speaking. So hopefully we can respect that time. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about a comfort break. If we're still going at 9 o'clock or after item 7, whichever is the more appropriate, we will take a 5-minute comfort break. So thank you. Councillor Hunter, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can fully appreciate why you're giving objectors and supporters 10 minutes on item 8. The only thing is, though, last time this cropped up, it was a 1-item agenda. And tonight we have more than 1 item. I think the probability is that we'll be looking at a number of applications over a number of months now, that this will crop up more often. And I think some thought should be given to planning and the management of our meetings as to how we handle it, because I fear we're going to see a lot of applications over the next few months which will meet the same criteria and probably make it totally unmanageable as far as the committee is concerned. Because when you're sitting in meetings to 11, 12 o'clock at night, obviously, I would admit, judgment is sometimes taken over by tiredness. Just a thought, Chairman,
Yes.
one to be considered by planning.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter, and I do agree that it's not helpful to be making decisions at 11 o'clock at night. This is why we're having extra planning meetings, because I would rather have shorter meetings. I did request a 1-item agenda because both these items are substantial items. However, in order to determine them by the deadline, we've had to put them in together. Yes, I do understand that I've set a precedent by agreeing to give extra time. So I do share your concerns. I take those comments on board, and we'll see what we can do to try and keep the agendas at a reasonable length in the future. Councillor Allen, did you have something you wanted to say, or?
I think to save time for Councillor Hunter, I'll leave it.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, we'll move on to item 6, public participation. So the registered speakers have already been confirmed as present during the roll call, and I will call you to address the committee at the appropriate time. So let's move on then to item 7. Land opposite Heath Farm, Brary Lane, Royston, 20/00744/OP. This item is outline planning application for up to 99 residential dwellings, including up to 40% affordable housing, introduction of structural planting and landscaping, informal public open space and children's play area, surface water flood mitigation, vehicular access point via the demolition of an existing property on Echo Hill. All matters are to be reserved save access. And I would like now to invite our officer, Melissa Tyler, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors and members of the public. I have a couple of updates. I've received additional representation since the publication of the report. Firstly, from Natural England. Following the removal of the emergency access, Natural England have stated they have no objection, subject to appropriate mitigation being secured by the Section 106. Secondly, had an email from Fairfield Heath Conservators. We have responded via email this morning to concerns raised in regards to associated reports and recommendation which is being presented to the meeting of the Planning Control Committee tonight. This representation does not change the recommendation for approval or the details of the heads of terms in the Section 106. And thirdly, we've received a letter from Buxton Solicitors on behalf of the action group Say No to Gladman's. Newnatter has sent a response and copied in all members this evening, responding to the issues raised in regards to access, the EIA, the tilted balance and the triple SI. She has concluded that we do not consider there is a risk of a judicial review if you are minded to grant the application. And lastly, we've received a late representation from Ray Munden regarding land ownership and access. This also, I think, was copied into all members. This issue has been raised numerous times and the applicant has responded. They've addressed the issue, stating that no third-party land has been included, and this has been checked and confirmed on several occasions. Any dispute will be a civil matter and not planning consideration. So they're my updates. I've got a few spelling mistakes and clarification on the report. The text in section 1.4 under the policies is out of date and should be in line with what is stated in section 4.3.16, where the emerging local plan is now well advanced and the local plan inspector has issued their proposed further modifications and following the additional hearings earlier this year. There's a spelling mistake at 4.3.28, which refers to a tiled balance. This should be read as tilted balance. And lastly, 4.4.3 says, I consider that a case of refusal based on policy harm alone, without any substantive identified harm, can be sustained at appeal. This should be read as cannot. And then I've just got a couple of changes to wordings of conditions. Condition 22, I've added section E, which details of a phased landscaping scheme of all planting to be submitted with agreed triggers. And then condition 24, I've added and hedges to be protected. So the condition will read, before the commencement of any other works on the site, trees and hedges to be retained shall be protected by the erection of temporary chestnut paling or chain link fencing to a minimum height of 1.2 metres on a scaffolding framework located at the appropriate minimum distance from the tree trunk in accordance with section 4.6. Trees in relation to design, demolition and construction, recommendations unless in particular case the local planning authority agrees to dispense with this requirement. The fencing shall be maintained intact for the duration of the engineering and building works. No building materials shall be stacked or mixed within 10 metres of the trees or hedges. No fires shall be lit where flames could extend within 5 metres of the foliage, and no notice shall be attached to trees. And then in the reason, to prevent damage to or destruction of trees and hedges to be retained on the site in the interest of the appearance of the completed development and visual amenity of the locality. And then just finally, I've added changes to the informative 11 for the design guide. So I've included a sentence, so the whole thing will say, given the typography of the site and the general character of the area, as part of any reserved matter application, the inclusion of a single-storey development on the more sensitive areas of the development should be considered, and any development above 2 stories needs to be carefully considered and adequately justified. The inclusion of 2.5 stories or greater development is of particular concern. Of any development of this nature should be avoided unless it can be robustly justified with reference to prevailing context of the area. So that's all my updates. So if we could go to the slides. Okay, so if you go to the next slide. Okay, the site is located on the edge of the current settlement boundary to the south of Royston. The site is currently arable fields with an area of approximately 9 hectares. There is a residential area, Echo Hill, to the north of the site, with Leyston Park to the northeast and a residential road, Royce Grove, to the east of the site. The site is close to Fairfield Heath, with a bridleway running along the western and southern boundaries of the site. The bridleway is no longer part of the proposed site as a proposed emergency access, which was removed from the scheme following confirmation that an emergency access is not required for highway safety. Outline planning permission is sought for up to 99 dwellings with public open space and a vehicle access point from Echo Hill following the demolition of number 24. All matters are reserved except means of main access to the site. Okay, next slide. There's some series of photos. So this will be the access from Echo Hill. And this is looking towards number 24, which was to be demolished. It's with not the red car, the next one. Next slide, please. The photo here is the closer look at the existing dwelling of number 24, which is to be demolished. Okay, next slide. So this is the existing field access point into the site from the bridleway. This area is identified as the more sensitive area where single-storey dwelling houses will be allocated. Next slide. This is taken from a similar point. As you can see, the ground slopes up to the main part of the site with Echo Hill houses backing on to the site on the left. And next slide, please. Again, this is a little bit further into the site. This shows the Echo Hill houses backing onto site. You will note the difference of levels which are evident in this photo. And next slide, please. This is the northeast corner of the site showing levels of Echo Hill houses. And on the right-hand side, you can just see the TPO trees. Leyston Park is covered by a group TPO, which includes the boundary trees along the northeast section of the site, which you can just see. So next slide, please. Okay, this is the site looking south. You can see the hedgerow to the right, which is to be retained. The hedgerow border the site on the north, south and west of the section through the site. A number of trees flank the east boundary. Existing hedgerows will be maintained around the boundary and through the site where possible. Next slide, please. So this is a photo taken in the middle of the site, just below the ridge, looking north towards Echo Hill. Next slide. This is again from a similar position, from below the ridge, looking west towards the Heath. And you can just see Heath Farm in the foreground. Next slide, please. So this is taken in the southwest corner, looking towards Royce Grove. This will be the open space area with proposed dwellings to the left and centre of the photo. Okay, next slide. Okay. Can you just go to the next slide? I think there was supposed to be that one first. Okay. This is an indicative layout plan which has been submitted showing the proposed dwellings of up to 99 dwellings, which is a reduction from the previous refuse scheme of up to 107 dwellings. The indicative plan outlines the area of housing, internal roads, and illustrates the extent of the open space provision. As part of the proposal, a large part of the site is to be open space. Approximately 5.3 hectares is proposed to be green infrastructure within the site. The public open space would be located within the central and southwestern quadrant of the site, and the application includes a proposal to create new areas of grassland, woodland, scrub and wetland areas that will contribute to local biodiversity and also provide opportunities for formal and informal recreation. If you go back to the previous slide. So this is another illustrative plan. This just demonstrates more the open space and the development areas and the levels of planting to help mitigate against the impact of the development in the wider context, including buffer areas between the development and the existing houses on Echo Hill. The site is located outside the settlement boundary of Royston and conflicts with policies in the Save Local Plan and the Emerging Local Plan. The applicant has reduced the dwelling numbers following the previous refuse scheme in order to reduce the potential impact on the landscape. The applicant has offered the full 40% of affordable housing in line with the policies in the Emerging Local Plan. The housing mix has been agreed in line with policy HS3 and included in the agreed section 106. It is in my opinion that mitigation measures could be implicated through careful design considerations as part of any reserved matters application to reduce any potential adverse living conditions impacts associated with development. Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, this plan demonstrates the access with a street scene and a section through the site where number 24 is located. The plan shows that the access is shown as 5.5 metres wide with two 2-metre wide pavements on each side and a green verge next to each neighbouring boundary. The section shows a retaining wall to flank each side. Policy T1 of the Emerging Local Plan is considered consistent with the NPPF and states that permission will be granted provided that the development would not lead to highway safety problems or cause unacceptable impacts on the highway network. This means the means of access would, subject to mitigating conditions and planning obligations, be able to accommodate the development proposed without harm to the safe use of the highway and successful connect the proposed dwelling to essential facilities without the requirement of independent vehicles. As such, it is considered that the means of access would be capable of accommodating up to 99 dwellings in a sustainable fashion. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slides are the key, the viewpoints submitted by the applicant. Landscape has been identified as a harm in the planning balance. I wanted to highlight 4 key views that have the greatest harm. So the next 3 slides is viewpoint 11. These show a single viewpoint from the Heath showing the site as existing, which is this plan. And then if you go to the next slide. Moving on to the next slide.
Do apologise, I have moved slides.
Oh, okay. That's year 0, and then it's just the details not there. And then if you go to the next one, it's year 15. And then the next set of planned is viewpoint 10. So this shown from a single viewpoint from the Heath nearer the site. So this is as existing, and the next slide is year 0, and the next slide is year 15, where you can see the trees and landscapes will have matured and reduced the impacts. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is viewpoint 3. This is along the existing bridleway looking north, showing the site as existing. And then next slide is year 0, and the next slide is year 15. Again, where trees and landscapes will have matured. Echo Hill as existing is already prominent in this view. Okay, next slide. So this is viewpoint 5, taken from this southwest corner. These show a single point view from within the site. So this is year 0, and then the next one is year 15. Again, where it's showing the trees will have matured and softened the landscape harm. And if you can go back to the indicative plan. The go forward one, that's it. So no technical objections are raised to this development by the relevant statutory and non-statutory consultees, and conditions have been recommended by a number of these consultees if permission is to be granted. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarifications in regard to the proposal. Just like to say, we are joined by officers from Herts County Council, from the Passengers Transport Unit and Highways, and our landscape consultant is also in attendance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any clarification questions for our officer? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. It's relating to the actual report and the site history in the report. And the reason, and this application is for outline, all matters reserved apart from access. If you look at the site history report under 2.4, 1902927 PRE, pre-application thing, residential development of 99 dwellings, which is this one, demolition of Echo Hill, says in order to fully access the impacts of the proposal in regards to the previously refused scheme, means of access, layout and scale should be dealt with at the outline stage. Also additionally carefully consider landscape features. So could the officer just tell me why we're only considering access in this outline stage rather than the layout and scale as well, which that actually asked for?
Melissa, can you address that, please?
Yes, certainly. So that was a conclusion in our pre-application advice. Obviously, given the refusal of the previous scheme, that was our viewpoint, that means of access, layout and scale would be more beneficial. However, the applicant wished not to go down that route. So we have to look at the application that's been given to us.
Okay, thank you for that.
Are there any further questions from members for our officer? Okay, thank you. In which case, we'll move on to our registered speakers. And I'd like to invite, first of all, Miss Melanie Hill to address the committee. Welcome. And you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
I represent Royston Says No to Gladman, and the voice of over 450 residents and households who objected to this application, 200 more than objected to the previous application, and over 180 of which are probably viewing this meeting as I speak. I also live next door to the property to be demolished. This application is worse in terms of access, planning balance and sustainability than the previous one. Our barristers have helpfully written to you regarding various areas you should consider, including some aspects they believe to have been unlawful, and all our arguments are based upon planning law, planning balance and sustainability. Imagine living next door to a 2-storey building being demolished for a major access road with at one point less than a metre distance to your property. That is what is being proposed. God forbid my child was injured or worse whilst this was happening for simply just being in the house or garden, and I do wonder where that liability would fall. Gladman knows safe and adequate access cannot be achieved, and that is why they offered to purchase both my property and number 23, the other adjoining property. Restrictive covenants also exist on every property in Echo Hill, which residents will enforce. The applicant has claimed that the access is within sole ownership of the property to be demolished, number 24. NHDC have been provided with a copy of the deeds for number 23, which show that they, not the applicant, own land to be used for the new access. A copy of the deeds for number 24 at conveyance also supports this. At no time has the legal standing of the drawing regarding land ownership produced by the applicant and only very recently displayed on the portal been certified, and contrary to law, notices have not been served on the landowners. Number 23 have actually commenced legal action on this point. Several of HCCH planning conditions, including number 5 and number 1, cannot be achieved in relation to achieving the gradients, and also reserved matters relating to access. HCCH are claiming the issues raised by residents can be addressed at reserved matters. This is contrary to the public notice for the site. In email correspondence between the applicant and NHDC, both parties agreed that access cannot be a reserved matter. To be crystal clear, Gladman do not have ownership of all the land they need. Access cannot be a reserved matter. On this aspect alone, this application should be refused. The demand responsive transport proposed to deal with the lack of a bus stop within 400 metres of the development is flawed. You will be agreeing to a significant new development not allocated in your own emerging plan to fund this. HCCH do state, we don't know if we will be successful in getting the DRT money. Your own officer states this service is designed to improve transport in predominantly rural areas. This is not a rural area. To illustrate the nonsense of what is proposed, I could say my favourite football team will probably win the league if a billionaire invested billions into the club. However, that doesn't mean one will magically appear and do so. There's no tangible evidence that this service can be provided and sustained. The access proposals and transport measures by the applicant are disingenuous, but both HCCH and NHDC refused to discuss this with our transport consultant. The Conservatives of Fairfield, Heath and Greens have refused permission for mitigation works on their land and are very unhappy with the detail of Section 106 proposals. This cannot be a reserved matter. HCCH have failed in their statutory duty to consult under point 3 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. NHDC have also failed regarding the Town and Country Planning Order 2015 by not making available to the public or other consultees the evidence used, contravening another general principle that the planning process should be transparent. With regard to harm to the SSSI, despite what NHDC's legal department say, no time has been given for public consultation on Natural England's response. There is no credible evidence of SSSI mitigation measures. No new EIA was carried out, even though our solicitors have notified NHDC of the unlawfulness of not doing this. We are happy to address this in questions at the end. In conclusion, long-term housing land supply will always be an issue, but your local plan, the appropriate vehicle to test what sites can add to supply, is nearing adoption. This is simply another ad hoc site, opportunistically put forward by a developer, which upon even scant examination is patently incapable of adding to the supply. The NPPF specifically states local authorities can refuse such schemes, even if the 5-year land supply has yet to be agreed, if the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. If you accept the sole rationale for the recommendation by your officers, lack of an identified housing land supply, you are in effect abrogating responsibility for any planning application that comes forward for new housing in the lifetime of what becomes a pointless plan, whatever the adverse impacts. This would surely be irresponsible very short-sighted and wrong, and I hope you recommend refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Mary. That was all. Thanks for your presentation. That was all very clear. But there was just one thing that you mentioned earlier on in that, which I just wanted to ask about, which was, I mean, you said that there were restrictive covenances on the properties in Echo Hill. Could you just clarify for me what that means?
Yep, of course. I've got Claire to help me as well. Just take a breath.
Yes. So when the houses were built, the covenants were obviously, and we've we've sought legal advice, and everyone on Echo Hill in their objections have stated, so obviously covenants aren't a planning issue, but they would certainly affect the supply, so the timings. So all of the residents on Echo Hill would be prepared to fight the covenant.
Is that clear, Councillor Tyson, or you?
I'm getting there.
Yeah, I think I'd like a little bit more clarity.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, and I am a resident, I am not an expert in any, in anything, I suppose, really. But so the covenants were put in place when the development was built back in the 80s. And this development went all the way to the Secretary of State at that time. And the covenant basically states the houses cannot be demolished. So therefore, the owners of the properties on Echo Hill, and they exist on all of the properties, including 23. So our advice from legal advisors is that although that covenant isn't a planning material consideration, a planning matter, it would absolutely, in terms of timing, it would slow things down because the residents would absolutely fight it.
So just to clarify, Claire, are you saying that number 24, the one that's proposed to be demolished, has a covenant saying it cannot be demolished?
Yes, and number 24 has been informed that residents will inform. A letter went to Gladman as well, and as you know, we never received a reply from either party. And
so you're saying it's an issue of timing, so that that covenant could be overturned, but it would take time.
Yeah, and it's deliverability. It's deliverability. You've got an emerging plan that is very, very soon to be adopted, and I guess it's for the members to decide whether that's of material consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tyson?
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more, please, about the documentation that you said you'd not been able to see. I know it's obviously difficult to discuss something you can't see, but could you sort of let us know a little more about what you feel was not transparent to you from documents?
So yeah, and again, we may not be. It's quite difficult. There aren't reference numbers. It's quite difficult to sort of piece together the puzzle. So we believe there are 3 documents, and actually another further document may have been mentioned in the legal letter that only came through at 6:37. So it's quite difficult for us to comment on that. But there are 3 documents that our lawyers have mentioned. If I just. So one of them is let me just go to my so yeah, there's a green redacted statement on common ground, indicative green infrastructure plan, the Sun Hill pedestrian improvements, arboriculture assessment. So, I mean, I have absolute sympathy with the officers, 450 objections, huge amounts of technical reports and reports that we've presented, that the applicant has presented. It's quite confusing. There's a lot of information there.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Allen?
It does, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Unless I heard it wrong, during the presentation from Melanie, I think she intimated that they don't own all the land. Now, I don't know whether she was referring to the property at 24, which is for access, or there's other parcels of that land they're asking to develop that they don't have a claim to. Would it be possible to get clarification on that?
Thank you. Yes, Claire, would you like to address that?
So NHDC have been provided with a copy of the deeds for 23, which show that the applicant does not own all the land used for the access. So they've signed the certificate B, but not all of the land is in that. And a copy of the deeds for 24 at conveyance also support this. So there is a boundaries dispute between 23 and 24, and this appears to have basically when 24 Gladman served at the land registry, the drawing regarding the land ownership provided by the applicant and that was only recently displayed on the portal was certified. And so therefore the certificate is not complete. So no notice has been shared with number 23. They own a strip of land and we do not, well, access is not possible without that strip of land. So no Cert B has been issued.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for our speaker? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now invite our member advocate, Carol Stanier, Councillor Stanier, to address the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Just checking you can hear me.
We can.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. So the previous application was refused partly because of the access. This application uses the same access route via Briery Lane and Sun Hill, which is narrow and heavily parked up. And it also adds Echo Hill, which is a very steep gradient road coming off the original access road, which is also narrow and can be treacherous in the winter months. This road is not suitable as the only access point into a large estate. A recent road blockage on the one-way part of Sun Hill caused havoc in the area for several weeks. And this is without the added pressure from an additional 99 houses and associated vehicles. I am particularly concerned that this development will take the overall number of properties accessible only via Briery Lane on the way in to well over 300. I'm told by residents that large vehicles such as waste trucks already have problems accessing parts of Echo Hill. Adding to the volume of traffic going up this road will lead to even more blockages and decrease safety of the roads and the already narrow pavements. And in fact, the proposed improvement scheme for the pavements will likely cause problems and damage existing trees alongside the pavements as well. The development will be too far away from the town centre and using too steep an access that many residents would choose to walk or cycle. I couldn't cycle up Echo Hill myself. All occupied areas of a development should be no more than 400 metres walking distance from bus stop, which is clearly not the case here. And the proposed mitigation of an on-demand bus service is confusing and unlikely to be funded in perpetuity, if at all. The development is thus unsustainable in terms of access. As an elected representative for this area, I disagree strongly with the updated report from Herts County Council Highways. I'm astounded that they believe that Briery Lane, Echo Hill and Sun Hill are appropriate to bear the kind of traffic this estate would generate. Moving on to other matters of sustainability, NHDC recently supported Royston Town Council's bid to become a sustainable travel town. Herts County Council say that in a sustainable travel town, the general perception to all highway users will be that pedestrians, cyclists and public transport users will have a greater priority than they do at present, leading to a higher level of natural enforcement and behavioural change. This development, which will rely heavily on householders' cars, will be an obstacle to achieving that goal and to reducing the carbon footprint of the whole district. We do have a climate emergency. The proposed development is not in the current or emerging local plan, and Royston has already borne more than its fair share of development compared to some other North Herts towns. It's outside the defined settlement boundaries and it's a greenfield site. The last proposal on this site was refused partly on this basis. I point out that the number of approved windfall sites within the timeframe of the emerging plan is already well over the number expected for the remaining years left on the plan. And it has in fact been suggested that including the windfall sites, actually the council has between a 5 and 5.6 year land supply. This means that upon approval of the plan, we should expect to already be able to supply a higher number of homes than is laid out within the plan. And we therefore have no need to approve additional unsustainable damaging schemes like this. We've talked a little bit about the biodiversity. These open fields and hedgerows are home to various forms of wildlife and they border the SSSI of Thurfield Heath. Chalk grassland habitat is now rare in the UK and this one is particularly isolated and thus already under threat. Any development near such a protected spot must be carefully considered and managed to ensure it doesn't harm the SSSI. I am not at all convinced that this has been adequately done by the developers so far. The existing ecological appraisal appears to have missed many of the more crucial aspects of this land use, including by badgers. And this opinion is backed up by an independent ecological report from Greenwell Associates. I believe this development would do lasting and irreversible harm to the SSSI. The negative impact on the view and the landscape, particularly from the Heath, was again another reason for rejecting the previous application on this site. This current application would have a similar impact, and indeed it's hard to see how building on this site could have anything but a detrimental impact for the view from much of Royston and surrounds, but particularly from the SSSI. I call your attention to the Royston Town Council objection. Royston Town Council represents the interests of all town residents, and they objected strongly to this proposal. Their objection is one of the strongest and most detailed objections I have seen from this group, and I urge you to bear in mind their local knowledge. I've also noticed that Royston Says No to Gladman group have stated that they believe that NHDC hasn't carried out its statutory duty in several respects, and this does concern me, as I wouldn't wish the council and our decision to be open to legal challenge. I hope that we can address their concerns thoroughly in this meeting. Thank you. And if there's any doubt, the matter can be revisited before a formal decision is made. So I beg you, fellow councillors, to bear all this in mind when making your decision and to decide against granting planning permission for this speculative and damaging development.
Thank you, Councillor Stanier. Members, do we have any questions for our member advocate? No, obviously very clear then. No questions.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Chair, could I just make you aware that there are now 350 people on YouTube watching. That's been going up all the way through. So I don't know if it gets recorded in the minutes, but thank you.
I'm not sure, but I was aware there were a lot of people watching. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move on then to our final speaker on this item. Can I invite Ms. Sian Gulliver to address the committee?
Good evening.
Good evening, welcome. Hi. And you have 5 minutes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sian Gulliver and I'm a senior planner at Gladman, speaking in support of this application. I'd like to start by thanking members for the chance to speak tonight. I'd also like to thank officers for their professional consideration of this application. Their input has been invaluable and Gladman fully supports their positive recommendation. Gladman have worked closely with officers and statutory consultees to address any concerns raised, and all of the reasons for refusal of the previous application have been overcome. I do not wish to repeat the officers' detailed assessment, but will seek to summarise how outstanding matters in relation to landscape, impacts on the Therfield Heath SSSI and locational sustainability have been addressed. Through this application, the proposed number of dwellings has been reduced, and measures including additional structural planting, landscape buffers, and a reduction in the scale and density of development along the development edge have been incorporated to ensure the development will be assimilated into the local landscape. The case officer agrees that a scheme could be sensitively designed and laid out, with suitable landscaping and design measures secured through planning conditions and at the reserved matters stage. Regarding the potential impact on Therfield Heath SSSI, the case officer agrees that the extensive on-site open space provision, including new walking routes, in combination with a financial contribution towards the warden as part of the Heath Management Programme, would ensure that the development has no detrimental impact on the SSSI. In addition, it should be noted that following the removal of a proposed emergency access off Priory Lane, which is not required to make a safe access, no part of our application site lies within the SSSI land. Indeed, access from Echo Hill is deemed safe and acceptable to County Council highway officers. It's at this point that I would like to confirm that the applicant possesses a certificate from the Land Registry for the Red Line application site that confirms only the titles covered by the applicant's legal agreements are included. No third-party land would be involved in the delivery of the access and no further ownership certification is required. To resolve concerns about walking distance to the nearest bus stop, the applicant has collaborated extensively with county highway officers and has agreed to a financial contribution of £120,000 to enable their current demand responsive transport service coverage area to be extended to cater for our site. This will ensure that new residents have access to an affordable public transport service directly from and back to their homes. The County Council have confirmed that this overcomes their previous objection. Crucially, there are now no outstanding technical objections subject to the imposition of appropriate planning conditions and legal agreements, which the applicant is agreeable to. A Section 106 agreement has been agreed in principle and is awaiting signature. In the context of a 5-year housing land supply of just 2.2 years, equating to a shortfall of more than 3,300 houses, delivery of up to 99 dwellings on this site, including 40% affordable, make an important contribution to the council's future supply. As described by the case officer, there has been a chronic undersupply of housing since the start of the emerging plan period some 10 years ago, with the most recent housing delivery test results showing that just 36% of the required number of homes were delivered between 2017 and 2020. Relatively small-scale proposals in sustainable settlements such as this should therefore be granted permission to ensure an ongoing supply of new homes until the larger strategic sites in the emerging plan start to be delivered later in the plan period. The provision of new homes on this site would not only make an important contribution to the district's housing land supply, but would also support the government's objective of significantly boosting the supply of housing to ensure that this generation can have the same home ownership opportunities as their parents. As well as providing much needed market and affordable housing, which as articulated by the case officer must be afforded significant weight in the determination of this application, the proposals give rise to a myriad of benefits. These include the provision of 40% affordable housing, a substantial amount of public open space, including a children's play area to satisfy the needs of both new and existing residents, the reversion of ecologically poor farmland to chalk heathland habitat, enhancing biodiversity, the promotion of access to public transport through the extension of the demand-responsive transport service, footway improvements along Sun Hill to improve pedestrian connectivity into the town centre, and financial contributions towards a multitude of services, including the provision of a warden for Therfield Heath. In addition, the proposals incorporate a range of measures to mitigate and adapt to climate change. For example, every home will be equipped with an electric vehicle charging point and cycle or mobility vehicle storage, and more than 50% will have south-facing habitable rooms. As concluded by the case officer, conflict with policy would not in itself significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of our proposals, and it's been established that there are no technical matters precluding planning permission being granted.
5 minutes.
Therefore, endorse the officer's present.
Can I ask you to stop then, please?
I hope you can see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So members, do we have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Sean. Thank you for your presentation. I've got 2 questions actually. The first one is on the pre-planning advice you were given. It was suggested that you apply for access, layout and scale under the outline planning application. You chose to go on the access point, but not on the layout or scale outline. Could you tell me why, please? You chose to accept that,
Sean,
not accept that advice, which I presume you're paid for as well.
Sean, can I ask you to address that question?
Yes, that's fine. So through the pre-application advice for our second application, sorry, bear with me. Sorry, just having some technical issues there. That is the advice that we received. Obviously, we had detailed discussions with officers at pre-application stage, and following that advice, we went away and designed a slightly tweaked scheme. Sorry, I'm just having some problems with my camera. It's going on and off.
You can address the committee audibly without the camera if you prefer.
Yeah, sorry. I think I've fixed it now. So yeah, through the second application, obviously we've applied for a reduced number of dwellings. Our application was always intended to be outlined with all matters reserved save for access. Obviously the pre-application advice, as you mentioned, did mention the detail and layout, but we're satisfied through our revised proposals that these matters can be dealt with adequately at a reserved matters stage, and I think it's been demonstrated through the supporting application documents that that is the case, and all consultees have agreed to that too. Obviously there's quite a number of conditions on this outline planning application as well that would be imposed, which would ensure that matters of detail and layout and all of the other reserved matters would be dealt with adequately at reserved matters stage. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, and you chose not to follow that advice. Thank you. The second question I had was on the as the one that you have put in on this outline application is about access. Yeah. The access you're proposing to do by demolishing that existing dwelling forms a very steep slope into that site. A very steep slope. Looking at your plans, it's around about 15 to 20 degrees, I would guess, or I've measured it roughly, around about 15, 16 degrees. Echo Hill itself, and the clues in the name, is quite a steep road, quite steep access. As you turn into development on the left, as you probably noticed when you've been up the site, there is a salt bin that was provided because people couldn't get in or out at certain points in the winter when the roads are icy. Never mind, the bin vehicles often miss it on their rounds because they can't get in when the weather's too icy. And that salt bin is there for cars and that to be able to get up that little bit of slope. That was put in, I think, at residents' request quite early on from memory. Which takes me back to the slope, which is quite a long way up the hill, your entrance, and it's quite a steep slope. You mentioned actually just in your introduction there that you were making mobility storage spaces, things like that. Maximum slope for a mobility scooter or a wheelchair user is 10 degrees over quite a short distance. You're making quite a thing about it's a pedestrian accessible development. You don't need the sustainable transport. Your own plans show that you can't actually access it in a wheelchair or a mobility scooter. Has that been taken into consideration? That you're limiting the development to those who can use it?
Sean, can you address that? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that question. Thank you. As you will be aware, we have had detailed drawings prepared for the access proposals, and we have demonstrated that the gradients will allow the application site to be accessed suitably. This has been agreed by Highways as well, and is established as a safe and acceptable access proposal. Yeah, as I said, we have provided detailed sectional drawings to demonstrate how this will work, and no concerns have been raised about the accessibility for wheelchair and any other users.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Levitt?
Yeah, well, I think Highways were actually looking at vehicles rather than pedestrian access as such and mobility scooters, but yeah, it sort of answers it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for our speaker? Speak from members? No? Okay, in which case I'm going to invite our officer, Melissa, to address any issues that have been raised during the presentations.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think there's anything that hasn't been answered that I could answer any differently. I don't know if Roger Taylor wants to go into anything about Councillor Levitt's point about the gradient.
Roger, are you able to address that?
Sorry, Chair, I had difficulty. I'm new to myself. Thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting tonight. Going by the degrees of that was mentioned, we go in gradients by percentages, or say 1 in 20. I'm not sure what the degrees actually mean in highway terms. I've just tried to draw it on a pad here to see what 10 degrees means in gradients. But I could come back to you. I know there's a conversion table you can get to convert gradients into degrees, but we degrees in the highway, sorry.
Do you happen to know, Roger, what the if you deal in a different unit, do you happen to know what the maximum is for a wheelchair and a mobility scooter? Because I think that's the issue, is whether that access is too steep for wheelchairs and mobility scooters.
Well, the disabled gradient is 1 in 15, so that is less a slope in 1 in 20. I don't know what that converts into degrees, but it's actually less than we've got at the moment on the road, which is 1 in 20.
Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Allen.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have just Googled this, if you would like. According to the Table of Common Slopes in Architecture, if you have a look on that, and of course this would choose the title there, a 1 in 8 gradient is 7.13 degrees. The closest I can get to 15 degrees, which is what Councillor Levitt mentioned, is 14.04 degrees, which is a 1 in 4. So yeah, pretty steep.
Okay, I'm not sure whether that really helps us, but thank you for looking that up, because the question is it too steep for mobility or wheelchairs? Mobility scooters or wheelchair, that's the question.
Yeah,
yes.
As I said, Chair, it converts to 14.4, so that's less than 15, 1 in 15, so which is a less slope than 1 in 20.
And what about 10? I think Councillor Levitt said 10% was the maximum for a wheelchair or scooter.
Yeah, didn't he say that equates to 14.4, which is less than 1 in 15, which is a disabled variant, which is less than 1 in 20. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
10 degrees.
So are you saying you're satisfied that it's within the limits?
Yeah, it's still the gradients in Manorville streets and roads in Hearts. It's our, 1 in 20 is, or 5% is what we have a maximum slope of our roads, and the footways, of course, coincide with the same. So yes, a electric wheelchair will be able to go up those slopes.
Okay, thank you very much. Melissa, is there anything else you would like to address?
No, Chair. I think everything's been answered.
Can I ask a question? It seems there's a disagreement about whether this land is owned. The land at number 24 is actually covered by this certificate. I've heard 2 different stories. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, so the red line is what Gladman and the applicant have presented to us, and they have offered a statement to back that up, and that's what we've got to take into consideration. The dispute would be a civil matter and not
Okay.
planning consideration.
With all due respect, the access is integral.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes. That's what I'm trying to establish, whether we know. So it says that. So Melissa, you're saying that the Gladmans have provided a statement, but what we don't know is whether there's a certification. We haven't seen the certificate necessarily. Is that correct?
Well, the certificate wouldn't be required if the land that they've put the red line on is actually owned by number 24.
But that's what's in dispute. Okay, but it's a civil matter. Okay, I think we don't have a conclusion on that one, is what I'm coming to. Okay, so there are 2 different views. Okay, thank you very much. I think if that's all from the officer, I think we'll move on to the debate then. Who would like to speak? Councillor Hunter.
Chair, before we start the debate, could I raise a point of order?
Yes, Councillor Levitt.
Sorry to do this, Chair. It's just been pointed out to me that Royston Town Council has raised an objection to this application. And I'm sorry, Chair, but you, Chair, sit as a member of the Royston Town Council?
Yes, I do, but I'm not on the planning committee.
Ah, so it was the Royston Town Council Planning Committee that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I've never. Thank you, but it's best to have these things in the open.
Yeah,
no, I've never sat.
I just thought I'd bring it out just in case somebody raised the point. Thank you, Chair.
I've never sat on the Town Council Planning Committee for this very reason, because I'm on the district.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
I didn't want to conflict. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Hunter, you're going to open the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually had a question for highways, and obviously earlier this evening we were advised there's no need for a emergency access, which one could argue about, but my thinking on this particular access on Echo Hill is that I've driven that road many times, and in all honesty, in all the documents that I've searched today, I cannot find a safety audit on that particular hill as far as this particular application is concerned. And I wonder if Highways could advise me that they have done a safety audit, because in all honesty, the amount of traffic that will be going up that windy road to actually access this site, and also the houses that are there at the moment, I find it hard to believe that it has passed the safety audit. So I'll ask them if they've done one.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Yes, can I just remind members that we need to address our questions in the first instance to the case officer, who will then pass them on to the appropriate officer. So, Melissa, would you like to respond, or are you going to ask a colleague from Herts Highways to respond?
If I could ask Roger Taylor to address that, that would be
okay. Thank you, Roger.
Through you, Chair. Yes, safety audits. We normally do safety audits on new development and new roads, but doing safety on existing roads, it's not part of what I do. I can only review what's put in front of me. And to put a safety audit on an existing road, it's not done by sort of planning. It's if a safety audit was going to be done, it would be done by the maintenance team if there was a history of accidents, etc. There's no accidents reported on this section, so we wouldn't really do a safety audit on a road that hasn't had any accidents.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunter. Does that satisfy you, or would you like to ask a further question? You're on mute. Councillor Hunter, you're on mute.
Apologies, I hadn't noticed. If I could possibly come back through our officer to Highways, that's an interesting point, but I have known Highways to do safety audits on roads, and in fact one particular road in Royston where there wasn't a history of accidents, to actually discover whether or not the site application could actually have the access on the road that was requested. In that particular case, the safety audit came back with a negative, and they had to find another access onto the site. Not being specific, Chairman, but obviously it has happened before in the past.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask, does our officer want to respond to that?
Again,
Yeah,
I'll pass that to Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously we do a safety audit report on the 278 works, but not on the existing routes along. The safety audit would be part of the section where the access is going to be formed from, and that's what's been carried out so far.
Okay. Okay, I think we'll conclude that one. So,
thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Trying to get my thoughts straight from my reading of the report here. A lot of this application seems to pivot around housing supply and our current land supply with respect to the incoming local plan. If my reading of this is correct, the site that's proposed does not appear in the incoming plan, and while it complies with some of the policies in the plan, it does not comply with all of them. Now, it may be a bit of a shame that our current plan is so delayed, but I'm aware it's difficult to speak in hypotheticals, but would it be the case then that had our local plan been in effect by now, the recommendation may have been to refuse this application? And I may say this as I believe with the inspector's recent response, the local plan may have in fact taken a step closer to being implemented than we otherwise might have thought.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Davies. Yes, I think that's a really good point. Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. I've spent a fair bit of time reading through this application and the background paperwork and everything. I've got quite a few pages of notes on it, actually, and mainly prompted by the question I asked earlier about why wasn't the layout and scale and everything dealt with in the outline in this outline application when it was asked for as part of the pre-app advice. And that asked me a few questions. And when I started reading this report, it's one of the few times I'm actually glad the officer's recommendation comes at the end rather than the beginning, because I read through all these pages and I thought, I know what this is going to come to. This is going to say refuse, and it doesn't. It says grant. And so I've had to go back through it and look at it again. Now, all the way through, there's lots of comments on landscape officer would still be adverse impact on the site. Residential scheme does not meet the criteria within the safe policy. It's beyond the development boundaries in the emerging local plan. It's contrary to development in rural area in the emerging local plan. There are no queries on the inspector landing around land use policies. Therefore, it doesn't meet with them. The site wasn't promoted in the local plan, nor was it put in as an emission, and the inspector didn't want to consider any emissions. You look at NPPF policy 11, particularly C and D. C, it does not meet the criteria in any way. D is the one this all revolves around, and that's around the bit about do the benefits clearly outweigh the impacts, and are those impacts more significantly demonstrable and are significant and demonstrable? And we look at the housing delivery test as well, and that only applies if it meets 11D. Now, there's lots of conflicts here. The development, all these are all the way through the report. There's all direct quotes in the report. And we look at 4.3.110, development is in marked conflicts with the aims of the policies, and that refers to the ones in the previous paragraph, which are Safe Policy 6, CGB 1, SP 5, any one in the emerging local plan. The mitigating factors are the ones that are meant to contradict this are the housing delivery test and the 5-year land supply. Yes, we haven't got a 5-year land supply. Does it meet the housing delivery test? To meet the housing delivery test, it has to make a significant impact in a short space of time to meet the demands. The emerging local plan is coming through and should be adopted whenever, fairly soon now, because the inspector's well on the way. And we need to deliver between 700 and 1,000 per year to meet the housing delivery test. This isn't going to do this in the short term. It's a fairly medium-term plan, because we're only at an outline stage at the moment. If this had been a full application, it might have been treated different, but at the moment it's only outline. So we've got the detailed scheme to come, which address all the issues about the impact on the landscape and everything. And one of the big impact things it says, it delivers open space. Actually, that's open space at the moment. Okay, it's not public open space, but it is a significant amount of open space. Most of the space that is allocated in that development is on the lower parts of the site or the dump parts of the site, and that's to make the sustainable drainage scheme work. It has to be open there to have those ponds to be able to work to make the sustainable drainage. So, be honest, Mr. Developer, you haven't got a lot of choice on providing that space because you need it for the drainage. Providing additional public open space in an urban area, yeah, I can understand that. Where this is actually on the edge of Royston Heath, one of the biggest bits of public open space in the area. You don't need any more public open space in this area. There's plenty of it, loads of it. I go up there regular and love the area. You look at those montage photographs in the thing, it will have a significant visual impact on that public open space, which is a really nice area. It will have its impact is only negated over about 15 years. And that, from those montages, which I think were the developers, isn't that much of a mitigation on those. Therefore, Chair, I don't believe that the benefits clearly outweigh the impacts in any way, shape or form. I don't think that, and I do think you can demonstrate that there is a significant impact on the area, particularly on the Heath and the views from the Heath. I do not believe in any way, shape or form that those benefits outweigh those significant impacts. And that has been the findings at previous applications and the reasons for previous refusals. And the reason for putting those bits in the pre-planning advice about the layout and scale was exactly to address those impacts, Chair. The developer has chosen not to follow that advice. Therefore, Chair, I am recommending refusal of this application on those grounds that the development is in conflict with the aims of Safe Policy 6, CGB 1, SP5, NE1, Emerging Local Plan, and the benefits do not outweigh the impacts of the development, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Levitt. Well, I would just like to say that I am prepared to second that refusal. I do draw your attention, members, back to the fact that there are covenants on these houses and therefore it is not immediately deliverable. And plus the fact that it's an outline planning permission has been said. So I think our speaker said very clearly it would take time to be able to remove those covenants, and therefore it's not going to help with our house delivery test. So are there any other, is there anyone else wants to speak? Councillor Hunter.
Yes, Chairman, I have my hand up for some time, but you beat me to the punch because I was going to second Councillor Levitt because he's brought up a number of issues that I've spent the day going through as well. And I find it quite interesting that our own officer, when it comes to the open space and play areas, actually wants to adopt it because of its effect on the SSSI. But obviously, within the report, a simple fact of paying $49,500 for a warden negates that. So there's no problem with the SSSI. Well, I think it would have an adverse effect on the actual Thurfield Heath. I also agree with Councillor Levitt. We're looking at an application here that's 8 units less than the previous one. In all honesty, I cannot support the recommendation from the officer. I think it's also interesting that the fact that we haven't got a 5-year supply of housing land negates the development being at odds with the Safe Policy 6, isn't it? Safe Policy 6 and development beyond the current development boundary of Royston. And moving lastly into demand response transport service. Now I had to do a little bit of digging on that one because I've never seen it crop up before. I've read about it and it's used in rural areas. Effectively what you're creating is on-demand taxi to the people that actually live there to go into the town. Well, 120,000 on a mini transit or whatever vehicle they're actually put into operation. And obviously I can't see it being a commercial operation, so it would last as long as the 120,000 was in the pot. So I wouldn't have thought that would be very long. And I would have been quite happy to second Councillor Levitt's suggestion to refuse, because I think in all honesty, this is not an application that should be supported by this committee.
Thank you so much, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Allen.
I just want to double check under our rules of debate whether a chair is able to second it.
Oh yes, I think I'm not sure about that either. Can we have some advice on that, Naranetta?
I wasn't aware that if someone makes a recommendation, anyone can Seconded.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I will remain as a seconder. Alternatively, it could have been Councillor Hunter. Okay, in which case I'm going to invite our officer to advise us on the grounds for detailed grounds for refusal. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Listening to the debate, I'll advise on what I think could be the way forward. I think Councillor Levitt's. I think what you need to be cautious of is you need to be credible as a decision maker. So you notice the officer's report is framed around the previous decision, and then it talks about how negotiations have taken place to overcome those reasons for refusal. I think if you're credible with your earlier decision, I think you need to, on the SSSI point about the mitigation, I think you need to accept that that was the same mitigation that was put forward last time, and you didn't include that as a reason for refusal. So I think you'd be at risk of difficulties at appeal if you started including that as your reason for refusal. However, I think Councillor Levitt's points about the harm being demonstrable and significant. I think what you could do there is you could maintain the reason for refusal that you had last time on safe policies 6 and 21 and the topography of the site. So by reason of its prominent position and topography of the site, the proposed development would be likely to result in significant localized adverse impacts on both the character of the area and visual receptors. And I think you can include the line in there, including from Royston Heath, because those were mentioned by Councillor Levitt. While these impacts could be mitigated to a limited extent, the combination of residential built form on high ground and the associated urbanising infrastructure and development breaking the skyline would act to occasion a marked and adverse change in the character of the immediate and intermediate locality and wider value landscape. This adverse impact would represent conflict with aims of the MPPF and then the policies that Councillor Levitt referred to, CGB1, SP5, SP12C, and any one of the emerging local plan, and then policies 6 and 21 of the safe local plan. And I think some of the arguments that you had about deliverability of wouldn't include those specific reasons for refusal. However, as you were raising that point, and if you were to end up in an appeal scenario, the council could put forward some evidence on that. If you're going to have to argue that even though we don't have a 5-year land supply, the committee aren't convinced that this site's readily deliverable, then you need to include that as evidence behind your reasoning for refusal. But I wouldn't put it in as a reason for refusal in of itself. It's evidence that goes with it. And then, of course, at the current time, whilst the legal agreement has been extensively negotiated and is pretty much finished, at this moment in time, as before, you don't have that legal agreement in place. It's not completed. So the standard reason for refusal that we've used before, the determination of the planning application subject to this decision notice, has not been accompanied by a valid completed legal undertaking, securing the provision of the requisite infrastructure and contributions, and the secure delivery of these obligations is required to mitigate the impact of development on identified services in accordance with the planning obligations SPD and say policy 51, and then policy HS2 as well, which deals with affordable housing. Without this mechanism to secure these provisions, the development scheme cannot be considered a sustainable form of development, contrary to the requirements of the national planning policy framework. I think with those two reasons for refusal, you're not reliant on technical consultees because you're not including a highway reason. You're not relying on anything to do with the SSSI. You're talking about deliverability, wider landscape impacts, and then you're talking about the absence of a legal agreement at this time. So I think those two reasons for refusal would encapsulate the main points that Councillor Levitt has raised and that were seconded by you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just ask, what about the fact that it's outside the local plan, the emerging local plan, and that it's outside the settlement boundary? Are those not good grounds for refusal?
Well, you didn't. What you're doing in the reason for refusal that I read out is implicit in there because you're saying it's contrary to policy 6 and 21.
Okay, so it's in there already.
You're including CGB1 as well, which you referred to. CGB1 is a new designation.
And the NE1 from the ALP
That's
as well.
That's right. You've got NE1 in there as well.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to check that those were in there because I think
what
they're quite
you
important.
could do, Chair, because I've added in the section about the visual receptors, so I've included specific reference to the Heath. You could say, by reason of its prominent position and location outside the settlement boundary, you could include that in there as a line and then go on for the rest of the reasons for refusal.
Okay, thank you, because Councillor Davies also raised that issue of it being outside.
Well, I think you can just include that in there. So by reason of its prominent position and its location outside the development, the settlement boundary, and then go on to the next sentence, the proposed development would be likely to result in significant adverse harm. So if you just include it in there, it's up front that it's outside the development boundary, and that's the settlement boundary, and that's one of the main reasons that you're concerned about the development.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think with that, with those grounds for refusal, we have a proposer and a seconder to refuse, so we can go to the vote. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so could members vote on the motion to refuse the planning application? Any members who want to vote to refuse, please raise your hand. It's unanimously carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move. Oh, it's 4 minutes to 9. Shall we take a break here? I think this would be a good moment for a comfort break. So we'll, according to my clock, it's 20:56. So we'll come back at 9:01 and resume on item 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, a bit late back, a bit later than I said. Welcome back, everyone. Can I invite our committee member and scrutiny officer to take a roll call?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just call surnames for the members to be a bit quicker. Councillor Ruth Brown.
Present.
Councillor Allen.
Present.
Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Derbyshire.
Present.
Councillor Hewson.
Present.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Levitt.
Present.
Councillor Davies.
Present.
Councillor Anguala.
Present.
Councillor Prendergast.
Present.
Councillor Rice.
Present.
Councillor Tyson.
I'm here.
And thank you, member advocates. Councillor Oliver.
Sorry, present.
Thank you. And Councillor McNally.
Present.
Officers Simon Ellis.
Present.
Yorinetta Kativu.
Present.
Melissa Tyler.
Present.
Sam DeCoco.
Present.
Hertfordshire County Council Anaya Jakaka.
You've already covered Anya, but is Mark Youngman here, Group Manager for Development Management?
Oh, thank you, Mark. Yep.
I'm here too.
Is that Anya? Thank you.
Anya, yeah.
Thank you. Roger Taylor.
Yeah, I'm still here. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Daniel Tancock.
I believe Dan would have gone because he was supporting the last application.
Okay, thank you. And Dave Hill.
Same with Dave.
Same. Okay, thank you. Registered speakers, Mr. Kevin Hinton.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Hanks.
Present.
Thank you. Miss Claire Newbury.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Simon Young. Mr. Young.
Present. Do you hear me?
Thank you. I can hear you now. Yes, thank you. Mr. Doug Neath.
Present.
Thank you. And Mr. Tom Donovan.
Present.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? I think everybody's here who should be, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome back, everyone. We move on to item 8, 19/00520/OP, land between Croft Lane, Norton Road and Cascio Lane, Letchworth Garden City. Outline planning application for residential development of up to 42 dwellings, all matters reserved, but access as amended by plans and information received 9th of June 2020, 23rd of July 20 and 10th of December 2020. Before I invite our officer to present the report, I would just like to ask if there are any members of the committee that are also county councillors, because this land is owned by Herts County Council. If you could declare that now. Are any of our members county councillors? None. Okay. I've got Councillor Derbyshire wants to ask something.
I'm not a county councillor, but I will be speaking as a member advocate against this application.
And therefore you're not taking part in the debate?
That's right.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for declaring that. Okay, in which case we will now move on, and I will invite our officer Sam DeCoco to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Before beginning the presentation, I do have some updates. Please bear with me. There was a technical issue with the report in which the conditions that I requested haven't been fully updated and pulled through. This only came to light this evening whilst I was updating highways conditions based on the most recent response on the 26th of March. And I do apologise. I'll try and get through it as quickly as I can. There were also some amendments to conditions based on correspondence with the applicant's agent as well. So you'll see condition 1 on the report still makes reference to means of access. This has been deleted on my updated list of conditions and replaced with internal access, as means of access is unreserved within the application we're considering now. In regards to conditions 3 and 4, a very minor update. Reference to demolition has been removed, as no demolition is proposed as part of this development. In respect to highways conditions 16 to 21, all of the beginnings of those conditions have been updated to include the occupation of the development authorised by this permission shall not begin. And then they continue to have exactly the same contents, other than the conditions which I am about to speak. In respect to condition 17, drawing number ST-2571-22 swept path analysis, Croft Lane, option 7B has been added. Condition 17 is just a development in accordance with details, highway specific details. Condition 18 has been shortened, and I will have to unfortunately read this condition out because it is materially different from that in the report. So condition 18 will now read: the occupation of the development authorised by this permission shall not begin until the off-site highway improvement works, as indicated on drawings numbered ST-2571-21, Rev A, means of access, Croft Lane, option 7B, ST-2571-18, Rev B, Croft Lane access strategy, and ST-2571-22, swept path analysis, Croft Lane, option 7B, have been undertaken. The potential footway and crossing on Norton Road, contribution towards highway authority, presented on drawing Croft Lane access strategy ST-2571-18-B, should be changed to provision of footway and signalised pedestrian crossing on Norton Road, start brackets, the works to be undertaken under section 278 works, end brackets. The work shall be completed to the satisfaction of the local planning authority and highway authority before occupation of the development, and the reason is to ensure construction of satisfactory development, that the highway improvement works are designed to an appropriate standard in the interest of highway safety and amenity, and in accordance with policy 5.13.21 of Hertfordshire's local transport plan, adopted 2018. So you'll note some of the details in that condition have been removed. Points A, B, and C, I believe, of condition 18. That is because they are included in up-to-date drawings, so they don't need to be repeated within the condition. I just want to be clear that the condition does not reduce the amount of section 278 works required, or the works required on the road to make the access safe. It's just a clarity issue and making the condition as succinct as possible based on the up-to-date drawings that were provided. There are 2 additional conditions which I have added. I'm not going to quote them, but I will provide updated conditions to the committee and scrutiny members to be included in the minutes. They are prior to commencement conditions to ensure that the details of the off-site highway improvement works are submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The details to include surface materials, footpath surfaces, curbs, grass verges, bollards, signage, street lighting within the site, road markings and paintings, and details of the speed tables and sinusoidal ramps proposed off-site. This condition is just to ensure that best efforts are made in terms of fine detailing to preserve the quality of the site surroundings as a heritage asset. And there's a final condition, condition number 26, which requires that the Off-site highway improvement works shown on the proposed details and plans are give details, or details are provided of how the trees off the site are going to be protected whilst undertaking the Section 278 works to improve off-site highways provision. That includes the widening of Croft Lane at the access points and the widening of the footpaths to 2 metres as detailed in the officer report and as detailed in the approved drawings. My sincere apologies about the length of that.
Can I just hold you for one moment, Sam? I've got Councillor Allen. Have you got a point of order, or do you need to speak right now?
Just a point of order. With this level of change coming up, we haven't been able to review it. I don't think we should be hearing this any further.
Can I have some comment from our legal advice on that, please?
Apologies. Sorry, members, this is a matter for you. The officer has provided the update. If you feel it's not enough, or there's too much information for you to then be able to make an informed decision, it is a matter for you. I can't advise on that. The officer has done what he's legally obliged to do, which is to inform you of any updates. But I can't, unfortunately, with this one, I actually don't have a legal response to give you. It is a matter for you guys to consider.
Okay, Councillor Allen, how would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. I feel that with the large amount of information that has just been added at the last minute, without the ability to refer to it properly, and especially bearing in mind that we have speakers that have been employed from a transport agency, we should defer this until we have the correct information that we can use and refer back to. So I would put immediately for a deferment.
So you're proposing a deferral. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Oliver?
Second.
Oh no, you're not a member of the committee, are you? Councillor Bryant is seconding that.
Yes.
Can I just check with our officers? Simon, can you give me some advice on this, please?
As Niranetta said, it's if members want to defer the decision to have the full text of all those conditions reported back to a future committee, that's the committee's will. But of course, we've got speakers here and you haven't heard any of them and you haven't questioned any of them. But obviously, if that's the decision, then we'll bring it back to a future meeting, and the invitations will be sent again and people will be able to contribute to the debate that time.
Can I just ask what the consequences might be in terms of non-determination if we were to defer?
Well, I'm going to just check when the expiry date is. When's the expiry date? If we can't get it back, we won't be able to get it back to the 27th of May at the very earliest, and there is a right of appeal against non-determination. But we would then report this back to committee within the period before. So no, the committee would be able to see this before we had to make a statement to the inspector, if that is what happened. Of course, the applicant may not do that. They may just accept the deferral and accept that they would come back at a later date.
Okay, so can I just to clarify, you're saying that if we were to defer now, we have another opportunity to determine it before we risk being...
No, if there is an appeal against non-determination, the decision leaves your jurisdiction. You don't have jurisdiction, but you in that scenario, the committee have an opportunity to make what's known as a putative decision. You would say that the committee would have been minded to grant planning permission or refuse planning permission, and then the appeal would proceed. I would personally think it's unlikely the applicant would do that, because until you've come to a view, they don't know whether or not you're likely to refuse the application or approve it. Because if they go to an appeal against non-determination, you can't grant the planning permission because it's out of your jurisdiction at that point.
So you think it's not much of a risk, is what you're saying?
Well, it's not much. No, I think it's unlikely that the applicant would appeal non-determination, because they're only likely to do that if they think you're going to refuse planning permission. But because you're not actually debating any of the issues this evening, it could be that you come back at 27th of May and you then refuse planning permission, and then they'd have the right to appeal against the refusal at that point. But of course, if you're deferring for these particular reasons, we will present practically the same report to you at the next meeting with the updated conditions. I mean,
we will have had a chance to read them then and respond to them.
Well, members will have done, and also, as Councillor Allen pointed out, some of the objectors have employed highway consultants and things as well. So those other people.
Okay, I'm clear then. So I've got Councillor Allen proposing we defer, and I've got Councillor Bryant seconding that. I've got a number of other people. Before we go to a vote on that, can I just take the others? So Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd support that view about deferment. A number of these changes, this application is an outline around, and the only non-reserved matter is access. And several of those changes do relate to the access to the site, particularly about it not being brought into use. At the moment, says until development commences. The changes, I believe, say after first occupation, which is a significant difference to that access. And I think, just to be fair to everybody, particularly members of the public and people interested in this, as it is all about access at the moment, it would be safe. I think it would be safe to defer to have a good chance to have a look at the implications of that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, Chairman, it seems to be my night to be bested by Councillor Levitt, because I was going to say more or less the same thing. So thank you, Councillor Levitt, and I support Councillor Allen's idea to defer. I'm quick, I write down things, but I must admit the level of detail that was given to us this evening on those conditions was too quick and too fast to actually take in. And as rightly said, a lot of the issues are reference the access. So I'll happily support the deferral.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a proposal and a second to defer it. Anna, would you take us to the vote?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I can do. Councillor Allen's hand is still raised.
No, I think that's a legacy hand. Yeah.
Okay. If members wish to vote for the motion to defer, please could they raise their hand now? Yes, that's carried, Chair, to defer.
Thank you very much, and many apologies to our speakers who've taken the time and trouble to turn up tonight to find that we're now not debating this issue. You will have another chance in the future, and I think it is important that we've all had a chance to respond to that very lengthy set of updates, which related mainly to the access, which, as has been pointed out, was the key concern in this application. So I look forward to welcoming you back at a future meeting. So if you were going to speak on that item, and you may leave us now if you wish. Okay, bye-bye. You can stay if you wish, but you may leave us. Okay, let's move on then to item 9, 20/01098/FP, the Boot 73 High Street Baldock. This is for a 2-storey side extension, a first floor rear and side extension, and change of use of building from public house and 3-bedroom flat to C3 residential to create 4 2-bedroom flats and 2 1-bedroom flats, as amended by plans received November 2020.
Excuse me, Chairman, before
yes.
you move on, do apologise interrupting you. Perhaps this is a lesson to officers not to come to a meeting with so many changes.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure they've heard that. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Councillor Prendergast.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I've got a declarable interest in this item. My mother-in-law owns a property at the back on Pinnock's Lane, which is at the back of the proposed development. So I will not take part in this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Noted. Okay, so I'd like now to invite our officer, Melissa Tyler, to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. I've got no updates, so we can go straight to the slides. Possible? Yeah, next slide. Okay, the former public house, The Boot, ceased trading in November 2019 and is a two-storey building with an existing parking area for 6 cars to the side of the property, located on High Street, just outside the town centre area and opposite Tesco's. The property is surrounded by residential properties and it shares boundaries with 71A High Street, 83 High Street and a number of residential properties on Pinnock's Lane. Next slide, please. So here's a series of photos. So this is the view of The Boot from just outside Tesco's on the opposite side of the road. And next slide. So the boarding hides at the moment the existing car park area. The single-storey extension there will be replaced by a 2-storey extension and the access to the parking area. Next slide, please. So as you can see in this photo, there's a large sycamore tree. This tree is proposed to be removed as part of the scheme and to be replaced with a more suitably sized tree, following representations from a number of neighbours that suggested it be removed because of its impact on daylight and sunlight on the neighbouring properties' gardens. Next slide. So this is just showing the relationship between the existing former pub and the residents next to it, 71A High Street. And next slide. This is just showing the side elevation, again similar to 71A. The bin stores will be located along this side boundary. And next slide, please. This shows the existing side projection to be replaced with a 2-storey projection with access to the properties from this elevation. And next slide, please. Just taking a photo within the site. This will be the elevation that will have the 2-storey side extension and the parking area. And next slide, please. So this is taken from the rear of the site, from a garage court off Pinnock's Lane, showing the back of the pub. Okay, next slide. So these are the existing plans and elevations. The plans show the existing property with the vacant pub at ground floor and a large 3-bed flat at first floor. There is an existing single-storey side protection. Next slide, please. So here is the proposed site plan. Planning permission is sought for a 2-storey side extension, first floor, rear and side extensions, and the change of use of the building from a public house and a single 3-bed flat to residential to create 4 2-bedroom flats and 2 1-bedroom flats. Waste and recycling bin stores are proposed along with the conversion of an existing outbuilding to be used as a secure bike store sited on the rear boundary behind the proposed flats for 6 bikes. And next slide, please. So this plan shows the proposed ground floor plan and elevations. Materials include plain roof tiles to match the existing, painted render at first floor and red facing brickwork at ground floor to match the existing. 3 flats are proposed at the ground floor with private entrances to each flat from the front and side elevations, and access to the first floor is also sought from the front elevation. Next slide, please. The proposed first floor plan and elevation. So 3 flats are proposed at first floor, with flats 101 and 102 access from a shared lobby, and flat 103 with a separate rear internal staircase access from the rear elevation. And the next slide, please. So this is the vehicle tracking plan that was requested by Highways. So there's 4 parking spaces proposed. This is a reduction of the number that originally was proposed in order to overcome highway objections, in order that all vehicles can leave in a forward gear by providing sufficient room to manoeuvre the vehicles. And I have conditioned the inclusion of EV charging points. So if you go back to the site plan. Yeah, so there's been no statutory consultee objections, and I've recommended that planning permission be granted subject to the conditions for the reasons set out in the report. Happy to answer any questions or clarifications in regards to the proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for our officer? Councillor Allen. You're on mute, Councillor Allen.
My apologies. Would it be possible to have the image up of the car parking arrangements again with the access?
Can we have that? Committees. Yeah, just finding it.
Thank you, Will.
Yes, that one.
I'm trying to see on the size of it. What size car are they using in this image? Is it of an equal size to the bay, or because I'm looking at how the parking would go in there, and I drive a people carrier, and I'm imagining that I would struggle with this. So I was just wondering, do we know the size of the car dimensions there?
Thank you, Melissa. Are you able to answer that?
I think I've mentioned it somewhere in my report, but I can find that. But I know that highways, when they requested this, that the largest car size was requested to be accommodated. I know that the applicant did say that, you know, why should I demonstrate for a larger car? But I think that each space does fit the dimensions of a standard car parking space.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Allen?
I just want to know the actual size of the vehicle or the size of the parking space, because I can't see on that image.
Well, maybe, Melissa, do you know the size of the space?
Let me just scale off the plan and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Oh, sorry, are there any further questions from members while we're waiting for that? Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was going to ask a similar question, but for clarification, it says in 4.3.12, the proposal offers 4 parking spaces which would not meet the council's minimum car parking standards and so would conflict with the policy. And it says there's the exemption about being in a town centre. But what would the actual number of car parking spaces for I know what it is, but just because it's not in the report, for clarity of those members, how many spaces should the policy provide? So what is the shortfall? And I was going to ask a similar question on the size of the spaces, because I did find somewhere in the paperwork that those spaces are done on a national standard car parking size thing. It's in the applicant's paperwork. It says they're done on a size which I did find out, and it would appear from me scaling it that those car parking spaces are pretty much the same size as the car model that they've used. Now, it actually means that the boot is quite well named as a place for it, because when you park your car in that space, you wouldn't be able to open the doors, and the only way you would ever get out of them is through the boot. So I'd just like a little bit of clarification that that's not actually the case, and you don't have to have a sort of synchronized car parking team to be able to park them, because some of those angles look a bit, how shall I say, challenging for some drivers to get your car in there. And the fact that you have to draw a diagram to show somebody how to get their car in the space is a tad worrying.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Levitt. So, Melissa, are you able to respond to that? So, how many spaces would meet the policy, and what's the size?
Yeah, the parking SPD dictates that a two-bedroom property will require 2 spaces, and a 1-bedroom property will require 1 space. So
it should be 10, should it?
Yeah.
So to meet the policy, it would have to be 10, and we've actually got 4. Okay. Do we know the size of them yet?
So the length of the parking spaces is approximately 4.8 meters, and I'm just measuring the width. Hold on, bear with. So the width is 2.14 meters.
2.14 and 4.8. Thank you very much. Councillor Allen, how large is your people carrier? How is it more than 4.8 meters? I doubt
in length, no, it's not. It's the width as well that's the issue.
Okay, but I think 1.8 is fairly standard, isn't it, for a car width? Okay, so does that satisfy your questions, Councillor Levitt?
Yeah, I got it to 1.82 as well, and around as a car width, I think it was at 1.82 on the standard, and the width is 2.1, which gives you 300 millimeters to open the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
My car is 4.7 meters long and 1.9 meter wide, not including the wing mirrors.
Okay, so you might have a bit of difficulty with that. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I put my hand up, reference parking. I still to this day cannot understand how we allow 6 flats to be built and only put 4 parking spaces in. Are they expecting them to park in Tesco's over the other side of the road?
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions for officers? These are questions of clarification.
Okay, the clarification I want is why is there only 4 spaces for 6 flats?
Melissa, would you like to address that?
So originally there was more parking spaces allocated. However, Highways did object, saying that the vehicles couldn't leave and enter in a forward gear. So this was the minimum spaces that they could achieve that. Obviously, we are in a town centre location with a bus stop outside and walking distance to the train station, and with local amenities within walking distance. Therefore, as states in the parking SPD, we can take a view on sustainable locations that a reduced number of parking spaces can be provided. And also I state in my report that there have been a lot of other schemes approved without parking in town centres in the authority area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, and every one of them's been a problem.
Okay, thank you. That's a part of the debate, with all respect,
Sorry.
Councillor Rice. Okay, are there any further questions for our officer? No. Okay, let's move on to our speakers then. I'd like to invite Mr. Doug Heath, who is speaking in objection, to address the committee. Are you there, Doug?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Welcome to our meeting. You've waited a long time.
May I just say, you may lose me, but it seems Virgin Media in Bulldog is playing a huge trick and dropping out. So if
okay, we'll do our best to hear you. So
I haven't left you. I bet I would be back.
Okay.
Right. Sorry about
you
that.
have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm representing the residents who have put in complaints, mainly from Penrose Lane. Although we have no objection to the change of usage of the former public house, we do feel the proposals give no consideration to the neighbouring area or properties, particularly those in Penrose Lane, and there are a number of serious issues we wish to object to. particularly regarding the extension intended to be built in the existing beer garden. It's not a car parking area, it is beer garden, for clarification. Firstly, we've mentioned the lack of parking, and this could cause serious problems if they have to rely on road parking. There's already considerable amount of on-road parking in that part of the high street due to the existing neighbouring properties not having garages or driveways, and that's compounded during the day by many people parking it to visit the doctor's surgery, pharmacy, and nearby shops. Our fear is that those living or visiting the new development may try to find alternative parking in Pinnock's Lane and Pinnock's Close, which is just round the corner, where parking is already very limited. If the county council's proposal to introduce double yellow lines along part of these roads goes ahead, there will not even be enough spaces for the residents there to park, and they too may have to be causing even more congestion on the road. Residents of Pinnock's Lane and Close would certainly not take kindly to outsiders trying to park out in their street, which would inevitably when disputes and social problems.
Mr. Heath, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but you're breaking up so much I can't quite understand you. May I suggest that you turn your camera off, and that might well help?
That is a good suggestion.
If you're talking to an actual novice here, I've never used Zoom before. How do I turn my camera off? And I will continue.
There should be an icon with a little video camera. You can, if you click on it, it should turn off. Okay,
I
that's
can do
right.
that for you, Mr. Heath.
So yeah, okay. So if you'd like to resume, then can we give him a little bit of extra time, please, because of that? Only to be fair.
Yeah, stop the clock.
What do you want me to do?
You need to resume where you'd got to.
Where I got to, right. So we were talking, I was just thinking of the parking about the problems that would cause between the relevant parties over fighting for parking spaces. But on the proposed plans, we feel there's been no regard made concerning the impacts the proposed extension will have to the residents close to the development. None of the plans submitted give a true indication of just how close this development is to the existing properties in Pinnock's Lane. The height of the proposed extension will greatly diminish not only the outlook of these properties, leaving them looking at a vast characterless brick wall, but also a dramatic down the amount of sunlight reaching them, creating a considerable degree of permanent shade in their gardens. Now, as some of our residents' king gardens who grow flowers and vegetables all year round, this will have a serious effect on their ability to do so. There seems no reason to ask why the ridgeway of the extension cannot be reduced by at least 3 to 4 metres. There is also an issue that the extension includes 3 windows which are close to and overlooking the neighbouring properties, therefore seriously affecting their right to privacy. Now, we're also concerned that the proposed balcony for one of the first floor flats on the existing buildings is extremely close, probably no more than a metre away, and overlooking the gardens of 3 Pinnock's Lane. Although there is mention on the plans for partial privacy screen, there are no details given as to its height. We feel it will be insignificant to guarantee our privacy both inside our houses and in our gardens. There is also nothing proposed to show how they intend to combat increased noise levels which may arise from residents using the balcony. In one of the original maps shown at the beginning of this area, it suggests that the bottom of our gardens are covered in trees. This is not the case. There is only one small fig tree hiding it at present. We also note that the site as a whole, there's no provision for any communal area for flat owners to sit outside for any children to play, nor is any
4.5 minutes with extra time.
for residents
Okay,
to
thank
take
you.
any normal tasks such as drying, washing, or washing and balloting their cars. In conclusion, we feel that the development has been designed solely to cram as many flats as possible onto the site without any thought for those living close by or for the surrounding neighbourhood. And unlike recent other developments within the town, it's not in keeping with the historic nature of Bulldog.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Sorry, Doug, can I stop you there? We did give you a little bit of extra time to make up for the problems. And we are struggling to actually hear. Hopefully you've got your main points across. Do members have any questions? Councillor Levitt.
Good evening, Mr. Heath. You mentioned fairly early on in your presentation there about proposals to introduce double yellow lines.
Yes.
Yeah, could you just, where's that at? Because it's not something I was aware of in the application.
Well, we had a letter in January from the County Council proposing that they felt that there were the flow of traffic. I don't know if you know Phoenix Lane itself.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know the top end from the high street. It's quite narrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is a one-way street, and they were proposing to put yellow lines up on the corners of between Pinnock's Lane and Pinnock's Close, and the Team and Pinnock's Lane, to stop people parking there and to with the sort of flow of traffic easier. Now, I've heard nothing from them since. But I did write in a letter objecting to it because I thought it was a rather stupid scheme. I've heard nothing yet, so I assume it's on the agenda. Yes.
Thank you. I think we've still got highways here, so perhaps they could clarify that for us later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like it's still a proposal. Councillor Allen.
At the end, Mr. Heath, you mentioned about the gardens at the back of Pinnock's Lane. I used to live on Baldock High Street.
Sorry, I am having trouble hearing you. Sorry, could you say that? Oh, yeah. Touche,
that's fair. That's fair. When I used to live on Baldock High Street, my house used to back on to Pinnock's Lane, and there was a lot of overhanging. But you're saying that it's been shown that there's trees blocking the back of the houses going on to the pub?
If they build the extension, half our garden will it'll then be sort of the pub. It'll like be an L shape.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have a section when the sun in the afternoon will not reach our garden.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions for our speaker? No. Okay, thank you, Mr. Heath.
My pleasure.
I'm going to move on to our next speaker. I'm going to invite Councillor McNally to speak as member advocate. Welcome to our committee, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the Chair for the opportunity to address the committee with regard to this planning application. The first thing I would like to say is that neither I nor any of the residents and business people I've spoken to are against the change of use. A small residential development on the outskirts of Baldock town is both appropriate and sustainable. However, there are serious concerns about the density of the development, its design with regard to waste bin provision, and the lack of parking, which will seriously impact on the local area. The design and access statement indicates that refuse and recycling storage is mostly provided at the northwestern end of the site in the same position as the current bin storage. Proprietary bin enclosures are proposed to keep this area tidy. A smaller store is provided near the parking area for flat 103, which has its access at that end of the building. The site plan indicates 6 bins at the northwestern end and 3 bins at the southeastern end of the site. It would seem from the DAS that flat 103, a 1-bedroom dwelling, has been allocated 3 bins, while the other 5 flats are catered for by only 6 bins. That's 4 2-bedroom and 1 single-bedroom flat. even if the smaller store caters for both single bedroom flats, there remains a remarkable imbalance of waste bin provision within the development. Are the bins allocated to specific dwellings, as can be inferred from the DAS, or are they communal? If they're allocated, each dwelling would require at least 2 bins, 1 general and 1 recycling, as well as food caddies. By my count, that would require 12 bins, plus food caddies. This area simply has not been thought through enough. Moving on to parking provision. While the development does provide an area for cycle storage, ensuring the promotion of alternative modes of transport, when it comes to car parking, provision is scant. If the development is to adhere to the car parking standards laid down in the local plan, there should be 10 parking bays. This has not happened. A total of 4 car parking spaces are provided at the southern end of the site. I'm grateful for the provision of the swept path analysis to show how an expert driver may be able to manoeuvre a standard vehicle into each bay. Like Councillor Allen, I doubt very much whether I will be able to do that easily. But when you overlay the 4 analyses, it also becomes apparent that once all the bays are occupied, as Councillor Levitt said, it would have to be one would have to be a very small athletic person to be able to open the car door sufficiently wide to be able to get out. That is assuming you have the expertise to park in the first place. In the last 40 years, popular car models have increased in size by 16%. In fact, 129 models of cars exceed the dimensions of the standard UK parking bay. Squeezing in small parking bays with inadequate manoeuvring space is simply asking for trouble, and in my view, designing in the potential for neighbour disputes and rising antisocial behaviour. The Metropolitan Police website lists noise and nuisance parking as major factors in neighbour antisocial behaviour. Such behaviour is increasing significantly. An analysis of the crime survey for England and Wales found that 40% of respondents had experienced antisocial behaviour in their local area. That's 42% in Hertfordshire. This is the highest level since questions on this topic were included in the survey in 2011. This development as it stands designs in one of those major factors by failing to adequately provide parking facilities. The developers may say that there is public parking on the street outside the development. There are 8 marked bays at the side of the road outside the building. Now, I pass by that spot every day, often several times a day. And in my experience, it's quite normal to see 5 or 6 vehicles parked there. In fact, the photographs show 5 vehicles parked there, 2 of them being vans. These vehicles belong to business people, to people using the doctor's surgery. There's only 1 of those in the town. To people visiting Baldock and displaced residents of the Pinnock's Lane and Pembroke Road area. That's an area that is in parking crisis. The unnecessary addition of 8 to 10 vehicles on the road is unsustainable and will only escalate the critical parking position within the Pinnock's Lane and Pembroke Road areas, leading to an escalating spiral of disputes and reduction in the quality of life in the local area.
5 minutes.
Reducing the number of flats and increasing parking and communal provision.
Councillor McNally, your time is up. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Do members have any questions for our speaker? No, you're obviously very clear then.
Not quick enough.
But clear enough. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on then. So we've got our final speaker on this item, Mr. Tom Donovan is speaking in support. Good evening, Tom. Welcome to our committee. You have 5 minutes to address us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So my name is Tom Donovan. I'm the planning consultant appointed to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of the proposals. The applicant believes that the scheme proposed represents the most sensible utilisation of the site in the context of 1, the viability of the public house and its contribution to the high street in this regard, and number 2, the contribution that the housing would make to the shortfall in the district. Taking first the pub viability, this matter has been thoroughly analysed in the viability test submitted with the application. It is clear from the data that the boot would be making a loss in any circumstances, with reasons cited such as extensive local competition and the configuration of the pub. The loss of the public house is obviously unfortunate, but in this case it has been justified. Appreciate that isn't a point that we're really discussing here. Turning to the benefits of new housing, which is obviously a very significant factor in terms of the government's overall aims, and indeed that affects every local authority in turn. The scheme would deliver 6 market units, which would contribute to the noted shortfall in this district, which is a significant shortfall, notwithstanding the potential adoption of the emerging local plan. Importantly, these units are also deliverable in the short term, as opposed to perhaps an allocated site, which is going to take a little bit longer to come forwards. As is clear from the officer's report, the scheme would not conflict with the principal policies, nor are there any material considerations weighing against. However, it is acknowledged that the scheme would involve a slight under-provision in car parking if the SPD is strictly applied. However, 4 car parking spaces are provided within the site, and it's considered that these represent a sensible compromise between providing some allocated car parking whilst also making the development appealing to those who don't have a private vehicle. Given the site's location, there is good pedestrian and cycle access to shops, services, as well as public transport options, including rail and bus. Indeed, and as Melissa has mentioned, the SPD includes a mechanism through which a reduction in the usual car parking standards is acceptable in a sustainable location such as this. So it would therefore not be unusual to not conclude that this isn't actually contrary to policy, because the SPD contains a mechanism to allow this. It is also important to note that the council have approved a number of other developments for flats and town centres in recent past. This includes a 9-unit scheme in Letchworth, which was approved at appeal with 0 car parking, as well as 3 High Street in Baldock, which was recently approved, and that's a scheme for 5 flats with no parking. Both were approved given their highly sustainable location, and as I say, both decisions were relatively recent. Importantly, and touching on some technical points, the Highways Authority have considered whether, obviously, the access, the tracking is acceptable, the spaces are acceptable, that they meet the standards that they should be judged on, and that's what's important, rather than applying some sort of arbitrary figure to any of those facts. Moreover, the arrangement in the parking regard speaks to the council's overall climate change aims, which seeks for the district to be 0 carbon by 2030. Discouraging car ownership is a critical factor, and providing less car parking in a sustainable location such as this surely has a role to play. On a point of clarification, one of the earlier speakers mentioned a balcony, which has since been removed from the scheme as part of negotiations, so I just wanted to point that out. Waste provision is intended to be compliant with the waste standards that the council adopts. The provision is provided for that. The layout of that, it's communal bins, and they will be provided in terms of how they were normally provided by the waste team. It's not really a matter of planning. In light of this short statement, and further to the information in the application, the applicant hopes that members agrees with the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? No? Councillor Allen.
Hi, Tom. You mentioned there's a slight difference between 10 and 4. I think it's significantly more than slight as far as differences go. Do you know what sizes the bays are?
Well, I know what size the bays are in the sense of what Melissa's scaled off the plans, which I'm happy to agree with. I'm sure I would reach the same conclusion. I can scale them again, but I think Melissa's already scaled them.
So we're agreed they're 4.8 by 2.1.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to point out that obviously the spaces, and in the most recent Highways response, the spaces were considered based on a standard vehicle, and from a technical standpoint, they're considered to be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Any further questions for our speaker? No. In which case, let's move to debate. Who would like to speak? Councillor Allen.
I think it's such a shame there's the parking issue. I think it's a really good use of that building. I used to live at 72 High Street. I know the area very well. And I've frozen, haven't I?
You did a bit then, but keep going. We can hear you.
And I've frozen.
No, you're okay. Or maybe have another go, Councillor Allen.
Right, my apologies. I was going to say that I believe it's actually a really good development of the pub. However, I don't think I can support it with the number of parking spaces, knowing how bad the parking is along that area, knowing how bad it is parking across Pinnock's Lane, not only with the doctors and the chemists, but also there is the mental health facility along Pinnock's Lane as well. It's not suitable with this parking scheme. Otherwise, I'd have been all behind it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. It was quite obvious that Mr. Heath wasn't aware that the balcony had been removed, which is clear in the report. And the officer also deals with the loss of privacy and daylight quite well. It does come down to the one issue, and that's the 4 parking spaces. Now, obviously, it's very evident when you actually look at it. As said earlier, somebody has to be quite athletic and thin, or very adept at climbing through a sunroof to actually use those spaces. But the problem is that within the MPPF, paragraph 109 clearly states that this can be overcome. Now, personally, I probably agree that parking is an issue, but town centre developments are happening across the district without any parking spaces whatsoever. And I think if this committee were of a mind to throw it out on that issue, we would not stand any chance at appeal, and I can support it. So personally, Chairman, I'm going to recommend the officer's recommendation to grant.
Okay, thank you. We have a proposer. Councillor Ngwala.
I was just going to ask for planning advice, whether or not the committee are in a position to recommend that there's a smaller development here, because it is a good development, use of that building. But if it were if there were less flats, there would not be so much pressure for parking spaces. So, and I do know that Baldock High Street is particularly difficult for parking as it stands. So, and the obvious thing is that when you can't find a space outside, you turn the corner into Pinnock's Lane. And again, that's a really difficult place to park. So I wonder if are we in a position to recommend that the development is scaled down?
My feeling on that would be that we've got what we have before us, so we have to grant or refuse. But can you confirm that, Simon?
That's correct, Chair. Yeah, you grant or refuse what's in front of you. You can't say we.
Yeah. So if we refuse, so if we refused it and they're on the grounds that it needed to be scaled down, they would bring back a scaled down version, presumably, and then we would look at that on its own merits.
Possible,
yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Having a look at this earlier, the only concern I was on the parking. I don't for 1 minute believe that those 4 spaces are going to be usable as 4 spaces. However, it is a town centre location. It has got the bus stop, is in a sustainable location. So as we've done in previous ones and set a precedent for, and it's difficult to refuse it purely on the grounds there are car parking spaces. I was more than happy that there was quite a lot of on-street parking. I'm somewhat concerned about the proposals to put WL lines around the back and that and displace other stuff, which I wasn't aware of, and I would have liked a bit of clarification on that. and I do believe it will cause a problem. However, that said, I don't believe, as Councillor Hunter has said, there is any reasons, sound reasons, for us to refuse it on the grounds. Now, Councillor Hunter's proposed we accept. I think to move the debate on and see where we go a little bit on it, because I know others have doubts on it, I'm going to second it so we've got something to debate around, Chair, that we've got something up firm on the table whether to refuse or accept. I'm not happy with the parking provision, but I can't see sound grounds to refuse it on unless anybody else can come up with something during the debate, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Can I ask our officer to respond to the issue around the double yellow lines?
I don't know anything about that, unfortunately.
Is our highways, have we still got Herts Highways here? Are they able to respond or not?
Yeah, I'm still here, Melissa and the Chair. Yes, I don't really know.
Okay.
Okay.
So we don't know. Okay, so we don't know.
I think, Chair, that comes down under like TROs, and that's not really our end of planning remit.
No, I understand that, but it does have an impact on whether people from this development might be able to park locally and whether the parking is going to be pushed just further along and that kind of thing. So it does have an impact. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Back to the parking issue. I understand that obviously being town centre, we can sort of waive the amount of parking that we should put in, and we have done it, as the speaker said, in various locations. It's all very good at the beginning for people to say, it's in a town centre, we don't need parking. Just go and revisit some of these that we have passed where there's insufficient parking and just find out how the residents are getting on, because they're finding it a struggle.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other members who would like to speak? Councillor Tyson.
I agree with Councillor Rice. I mean, I think there's a lot of merit in this development, and shame as it is to lose a pub, but I think it's on the surface a really attractive proposition. But the parking issue is something that is very difficult to overlook. I wish there was a way that we could overlook it and disregard it, but in reality we know what's going to happen, and the residential parking in this neighbourhood is an absolute nightmare. Whichever way you leave the vicinity of the boots, whichever way you turn, it is just chaos, as Councillor Ali said. So I don't know. I mean, there are parking bays in the high street, which presumably the residents would basically snap up and dwell in. But apart from that, I can't really see a way out. So I would very reluctantly have to object to this, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tyson. Councillor Ngwala.
Yes, I think I'd like to propose that we refuse the application and invite the applicant to come back and submit a scaled down design, and that we do that sympathetically, because we do want, I mean, I think most of us are saying that we want to see the building put to good use, but that practically speaking, let's apply some practical common sense, that it would be better if this were scaled down.
Okay, well, we already have a proposer and a seconder to grant, so we need to go with that one first. If that one's lost, then we'll come to yours. Okay, that's correct, isn't it, Naranetta?
That is correct, but also to come back to Councillor Ngwala, she'd need a seconder.
Yes, of course.
And reason for refusal.
Of course, I would come to that should it be necessary. Okay, is there anybody else who would like to speak? No, in which case I'm going to propose we go to the vote to vote for the officer's recommendation as proposed by Councillor Hunter and seconded by Councillor Levitt.
Thank you, Chair. Could members please raise their hands if they want to vote for that motion? Okay, I'll just clear those and I will take a vote. Could members please vote if they wish to vote against? Thank you. And if anyone wishes to abstain, could you please raise your hand? That vote has been carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. I don't believe there are any planning appeals to report on tonight. All I need to say is that the date of our next meeting is on Wednesday. So see you back in a couple of evenings' time. And thank you very much. Good night.
Chair, can we just make a point of saying thank you to our officers for helping this evening, especially with the late arrival of information coming through. It's very important that we acknowledge their support.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much to our officers and their support. I'm going to close the meeting at that point.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.